Hi everyone, we are Married with Dragons. I'm Alex.
And I'm Ben. Got past our quick audio difficulty.
Yeah. Had to put the microphone back on.
But having the microphone on does actually help with audio quality.
Yes, it definitely does. So yeah, tonight we're gonna pretty much get straight into it and talk about some barbarians. And
Yeah, well, I mean, we've still got a bit of a funny story
yeah,
to start off with. But yeah, we're going to be chatting about all things barbarian, all things, rage and muscle-fueled machines that they are. Sort of just some overviews, I guess, about what to expect, maybe, if you're thinking about playing one, as well as, maybe some different ways to go about it. So yeah, we're gonna dive into that one, I think, tonight.
Yeah, it's my favourite class. So yeah,
You've had a fair bit of experience playing this one, haven't you?
Yeah, I absolutely love barbarians. I pretty much play barbarians in any kind of sense, either D&D or video games. So yeah,
I think
love
your first experience with sort of like a barbarian type character would have been Diablo 3.
Yes,
if I'm not mistaken.
Diablo 3 is where I first experienced the barbarian character, and yeah, loved it ever since.
I think it's any sort of tanky character, really, you're pretty keen on.
Yeah, I love tanks.
Yeah. Yeah, before we get stuck into all things barbs, I thought we'd... I was having a bit of a think about a funny story. This is going to be one of my favourite memories of D&D ever, whether it be as a player or a DM. I was a DM in this instance, but I think if you're trying to explain to someone who hasn't played D&D sort of how a normal session of D&D goes, it sums it up pretty well, I think. So it was a while ago now. It would have been what? Maybe
6 months ago?
I reckon probably even more. I reckon
Yeah.
closer to 12 months ago. It was a while ago. And I was running the session, and I had my players. Alex was one of the players. I had my players up against a hag woman of sorts.
Was this the one with the ridiculous name? Nani Pupu?
I knew you'd bring that up. Yes.
Yes.
The name of the baddie was Nani Pupu. I didn't name it. All right, it was a module I was running,
It's just
and
the funniest name. You're trying to set the setting for a real badass scene, and the NPC or the baddie is Nani Pupu. You can't take it seriously.
I can remember prepping for that session as well, thinking like, oh, this is going to be such a badass encounter if it does pan out this way and everything. I can just remember doing my prep notes and thinking, they're definitely just gonna make fun of this for sure.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how well I set it up, they're definitely just gonna make fun of this. Which they did, which was fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're up against Nani Pupu. And her two flesh golem minions.
Yes.
I'm sure was it a flesh or clay golem? I think they were flesh golem minions. Now, so you were playing your barbarian, fitting into the dance thing. You were playing your barbarian at the time. Now, barbarians don't exactly have access to spells, really. They have their non-magical attacks is really all they've got for most of the time. And if anyone hasn't come across a flesh golem before, they are entirely immune to all non-magical physical attacks.
Yeah.
So
I was useless.
I can remember you getting slightly frustrated in this encounter. So yeah, these two minions were certainly providing quite the challenge to overcome for a few people in the party. And the party was sort of trying to take out the minions whilst trying to take out Nani Pupu at the same time. Another one of my players, who was playing a ranger, was having the same sort of non-effect with the golems. Wasn't able to really damage them at all. Wasn't in a great spot. Nani Pupu was sort of dishing out a lot of damage, and so he decided to try and get creative, which I love. And he decided to. They were fighting at the front of Nani Pupu's hut, basically where she lived. And he decided to run into the hut. Now, I must admit, I don't know if you actually are aware of this. I must admit, I don't know why, but I didn't prep for anyone to go in the hut. I had like a vague idea in mind, but I'm like, I don't know why. I just didn't anticipate people going in there. I just didn't. And so he went to the hut and he's like, right, what do I find in there? I'm like, so I just improv and I explained, you find, it's a little bit dusty and cluttered. You find the table, the sink and basin over to one side, and I don't know why, but I described on the table in the middle of the room. So there was two windows on each side, sort of like a cot area, and then there was a table in the middle of the room with a bowl of red liquid. in it. I don't know why, but that is how I described the room. The player who I was playing, I didn't realise at the time, but he told me afterwards, the player who was playing the ranger took this to mean this must be a really important bowl of red liquid. Like, you know, he wouldn't just put it there for no reason.
You would assume red liquid, you either think, why would you see red liquid lying around? So it must have been important.
It was just the way my brain works. That's, you know, and you'll understand why shortly. So I described a bowl of red liquor. And I didn't give too much away about what was in the bowl because obviously they hadn't investigated or anything. However, in my head, when I created the room, the bowl of red liquid was actually just a bowl of tomato soup. That was going to be Nani Pupu's lunch. She'd made some soup. She's going to, I mean, bad guy's got to eat, you know. It's just that's what I imagine.
She was on a soup diet.
Farming, you know, farming in the area. It was out in the middle of the jungle, so she, you know, has what she can get. And she had some soup for lunch, which she hadn't eaten yet. However, that is not what the ranger saw. So he thinks, this is obviously maybe this is the Achilles heel of this boss. Grabs the bowl of red liquid, as far as he's aware, and he decides to leap out the window with it. He rolls very, very high for his, I think it was an athletics check that he did, rolls very, very high and sort of leaps out, smashing through the window, because he was sort of running from a flesh golem at the time, leaps out, smashing through the window with the bowl of liquid intact. And he's like, yes, I've got this death potion to kill this baddie with. Now, you guys have been fighting in this encounter for a fair while by this point. I think it had probably been it had been a while. The fight was dragging on because there was just not a lot of ways to deal damage to some of the people, and you know, with magic flying around from Nani Pupu, it was a tough fight.
And I'm pretty sure I can remember that fight because I was so useless. All I did was just loot.
I mean,
I was just like, screw it, I'm looting.
I can remember you trying to get to Nani Pupu to attack her because you could deal damage to her, but she was quite difficult to actually get to. Anyway, so the fight had gone on for a while, and the players didn't realise, obviously, but Nani Pupu was on 1 HP. She was on the last sliver of life that she had. The players didn't realise this, but anyway, it gets to the ranger's turn, and he decides to piff the bowl of soup at Nani Pupu. I was like, all right. You know, in my head, I'm like, it's going to do like, you know, barely any damage, but I'm like, all right. So I made him roll an improvised weapon attack. Nani Pupu didn't have a great AC. He had a pretty good dex, so he hit her. And so I described this scene of the bowl flying through the air with this red liquid sort of just squelching and flying and spraying over the top of everyone. And the bowl just hits Nani Pupu in the head. And that, like, it's like the straw that broke the camel's back. It cracks her into the head. There's like a crack of bone and she just falls down and dies, basically. And everyone's thinking, oh my god, he did it. This mystical elixir, he's obviously, you know, figured out her weakness. And I go on to describe the scene as, for some reason, there is a very rich, strong scent of tomato. And very quickly, the players realise that he's just piffed a bowl of soup at the boss. And then, like, after the session, they said to me, like, how the hell did he kill, you know, Nani Pupu with the bowl of soup? And I said, she was literally on 1 HP. If he hit her with something that was not, she wasn't immune to, he was going to kill her, and he happened to hit her with the bowl of soup. And so, yeah, that became a bit of a prolific, like, you know, what was it? It was like favoured way of killing enemies with meals.
Killing an enemy.
Yeah, I certainly didn't expect that to pan out, and that just shows the beauty of D&D as well. Something that I never planned for her lunch to be involved in that encounter. I just, you know, improv when he went into the room. I sort of just described what I imagined would be in there, and it ended up being a really pivotal part. Like, we still to this day remember that point in the campaign as, you know, the day he killed Nani Pupu with a bowl of tomato soup.
Yeah. Probably one of those unique ways of killing an enemy.
Definitely.
Welcome to everyone that has made it into the chat while we're in story time. But yeah, we're going to probably move on to some barbarians.
Barbarians, your favourite topic.
Yeah,
just about.
my favourite topic.
You've played what? 3 barbarians?
2.
Actually, you've played a yeah. Sorry, I was thinking of your
barbarians
fighter.
and a fighter. So I've played very similar.
You've got your likes.
Classes.
You've got your sort of wheelhouse that you're really keen on, which is fine.
Yeah, tank life is the best life in my opinion.
Yeah. Although in saying that, I'm pretty proud of you. I think you said you were going to branch out into a bit of a different sort of class or style for the next campaign we play?
I think my next class is either going to be a bard or a sorcerer, I think.
Sorcerer, or you mentioned a rogue as well.
Rogue.
You mentioned a couple, but
Rogue
they were
is quite
certainly
similar.
very different to your sort of barbarian fighter types. But I guess, for those who are new to D&D, anyone who sort of isn't aware, I mean, we're going to go through and sort of discuss really all the classes. Sort of just give a bit of an overview of the class, what to expect if you were to, if you're thinking about maybe playing that class in a game, what to expect, some pros and cons, basically just the ins and outs and what it's all about for that particular class.
And we thought we'd start off with the best class. So.
In some opinions. I do love barbarians, I think they're great, but I mean, not the best class in my opinion. I think they're good fun.
Barbarians. I live and breathe the barb life.
Yeah. So how would you sum up barbarians? Like in like a brief couple of words, how would you sum up a barbarian?
Girthy tanks.
Yeah.
That is probably how I would sum up a barbarian. They're just bundles of muscle going into battle and not exactly caring how the battle pans out, as long as they get their hits in.
Yeah.
And they kill whatever they're going for.
They're certainly hit first, ask questions later. Well, I mean, not all the time. You can obviously play them however you like, but generally barbarians. Yeah. That's how they're sort of the mechanics of them.
All action, no talk.
So I mean, barbarians are essentially, as the name suggests, hulking, generally hulking balls of muscle. I mean, obviously you can have barbarian, gnomes if you want. You can have any sort of barbarian, but generally barbarians are sort of the class that are wanting to beat the front lines, really thrive off the battle, off the fight, like to get in amongst it. I mean, their primary mechanic or ability is rage. So that sums it up pretty well. They literally like to get angry, get in there, and smack things as hard as they can. Yeah,
that pretty much sums up barbarian. And I feel as though when building barbarians, you can go very much rely on strength.
Yeah, I mean, as with any class, you can really build it however you want. I suppose it comes down to how you want to play the class.
Yeah.
I guess, the whole point of these sort of discussions is trying to make sure that people have got a bit of an understanding of the class and how it works before maybe making it. Because obviously there are some ways of doing it that you're going to get more out of it as far as power and strength goes. Primarily your barbarian generally is your sort of strength. Well, I mean, all of your attacks are strength based with the barbarian. So we discussed last time the 6 core stats: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Barbarians use strength for their attacks. They don't cast spells. They primarily use that for all their power.
I think the only time where you would cast spells as a barbarian is if you chose a race that had the capabilities of I can never pronounce this word, but thaumaturgy.
Thaumaturgy, you did well.
Thaumaturgy.
Yeah, that's a spell, a cantrip.
My very first character that I didn't see through but did play with for a little while was a barbarian tiefling, and she didn't have any spells, but she did have some cantrips. So
yeah, she was able. Well, that's technically a cantrip. For anyone who's not aware, a cantrip is a spell that you can cast at will, so as many times as you like, basically.
Yeah. So, for example, if anyone is a Lord of the Rings fan, you may have seen in the first movie where Gandalf manages to boom his voice. That is like a cantrip in D&D. So no really spells, just you can make a window open, or you can
which worked fantastically for your tiefling barbarian, because when you tried to impose yourself and intimidate people, you were able to sort of cast that cantrip and boom your voice and shake the ground and sort of add to your intimidation a little bit. But unless you're multi-classing or unless you've got sort of racial abilities, generally barbarians aren't going to be casting spells.
No.
They're primarily going to be strength-based attacks.
Yep.
yeah, as we mentioned before, the primary, I guess, main special ability of barbarians is what's known as rage. So basically, when you enter battle, you can declare that you're going to go into a rage, which it's sort of a bit of a meme in the D&D community. Basically, any time a barbarian will enter an encounter or a battle, 99% of the time they're going to rage.
Yeah, because why not? So it's pretty much taking a really burly player, and it's pretty much raging is just like you go into Hulk mode.
Yeah, you Hulk out. Why not? It's something that you don't really tend to run out of. I mean, you have a certain amount of charges, but unless you're getting into a huge amount of encounters per day, I don't think you've ever run out of your rages, have you?
No, I think because you get 10, is it 10?
10.
No, sorry. Depends on your level. I was thinking of how many rounds are in a rage.
So So a rage lasts for 10 rounds in an encounter, but you get, I believe it's 2 per day to start at level 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 per day to start at level 1, and then they go up periodically as you level up.
So I don't think throughout even when I was at lower level, I don't think I used up all of my rages because...
I mean, generally, you're not going to be having that many encounters. I mean, unless you're in like a really difficult campaign or you're in specifically a combat-heavy campaign, like at level 3, you get 3 rages. Very rarely will my players have 3 major encounters in a day. They might have 3 encounters in a day, but one of them being like, a little sort of inconvenience or something that sort of happens on the fly. But there's not often too many times you have 3, 4, 5 big encounters in a single day.
And I guess you can choose when to rage as well. So, like, for example, if you are in a party of, say, 6 and you go up against, let's say 3 chickens, just 3 angry chickens,
you may
not need to rage because you're just going to wipe them out naturally. So, yeah, you kind of pick and choose when you use them. And if you do pick and choose wisely, you shouldn't run out of rages unless you're going through something that's very heavy combat-based.
And I think that rage, honestly, has got to be one of the most valuable abilities in Dungeons & Dragons. So as far as the actual mechanics of rage goes, what it does for your character is it grants you advantage on strength checks and saving throws. It will grant you a bonus to hit with your weapons as well, so it makes it even easier for you to hit and to deal damage. And it also gives you resistance to bludgeoning, piercing and slashing damage made with non-magical weapons, which basically means any non-magical, because those 3, slashing, bludgeoning and piercing, those are the 3 non-magical damage types in D&D, basically. So basically, any attack that's not magical, you're going to have resistance to it, which means that you take half damage, which is, I mean, you're hitting more often to deal more damage, and you're taking less damage. It's a fantastic skill, and so it's pretty understandable why 99% of the time when a barbarian gets into a fight, they're going to rage.
Yeah, definitely, and it's definitely worth. Yeah, it's worth doing because you get the bonuses and you get the resistance as well. So it's good to have. Yeah,
so that's certainly the sort of core mechanic of the barbarian. But as far as sort of a few more characteristics of the barbarian goes, one thing that I think makes them quite unique compared to your other sort of particular tanky sort of characters is barbarians have what's called unarmored defense. So they don't tend to wear armor. They get a lot of benefit from actually not wearing armor. They can still use a shield or something, but they actually get a lot of benefit from not wearing armor, and they get great AC without having to wear armor.
Yeah.
So that sort of is quite a flavor difference as well. If you're picturing your character as someone who is like He-Man, who's literally walking around like no shirt on, like pecs out or something like that. You can fit into that. Whereas a lot of other classes will need to, especially tanky classes like a paladin or a fighter or something, will need to have armor on to be able to be have that survivability.
Yeah, definitely. And the good thing with the barbarian, it's not a very complex character to learn because with rage then leads onto other it expands onto other abilities that you gain when leveling, so you kind of don't need to remember
a huge
unique amount of abilities, because they start to all flow into each other and they kind of really make sense.
There's certainly a very central theme to the barbarian, which is your brute strength, your brawn, all of the mechanics linked in with the barbarian, and we're not going to obviously read through them all on stream, but all of the mechanics that are linked in with the barbarian are very combat melee focused in the middle of the fight, increasing your damage, increasing your survivability. That's the main sort of concept of how the Barbarian is run. Whether that be with the rage or as you mentioned, depending on what paths you take when you level up, you can go to like frenzied rage, so it sort of is the same thing but with increased, like upgraded rage is basically what.
Because when you eventually unlock frenzy being one of the Barbarian abilities, it pretty much activates when you're raging and you get an extra attack, so you can attack up to. You eventually unlock an ability called Extra Attack. But when you go into Frenzy, that means you can pretty much attack 3 times, which is a really good benefit to have as a Barbarian, because that's what you want to be doing, is being up front and center, hitting anything you can hit. And having those 3 attacks, you can deal a hell of a lot of damage with that.
The Barbarian still has a lot of flavour concepts. So, I mean, the main, and whenever we go over stuff like races, races in particular, a big one that gets expanded when new books get released, and sort of sub-classes of classes also get expanded upon when new books get released. So generally, most of the time, unless we sort of say otherwise, we'll be focusing on the main sort of, player's handbook information, because that's more readily accessible to everyone unless you go out and you buy all of the extra books. So as far as like a bit of extra flavour goes for your Barbarian, there are 2 paths that you can take when you get to level 3. One of them being Path of the Berserker and the other being Path of the Totem Warrior, I believe. Path of the Berserker and Path of the Totem Warrior. So Path of the Berserker really focuses on what Alex was saying. You mentioned that the frenzy rage, getting the extra attacks, upgrading those core abilities, really focusing on your animalistic sort of brutality to the character, which is what you've chosen for your previous Barbarians. And you've seemed to like it, and your current one.
Well, I went down the Path of the Berserker mainly because it just fit around my current abilities. So as someone that was learning, I didn't want to keep adding with Path of the Totem. It's just kind of, you had to remember like a little bit more to it. Yeah,
and as a new player, I suppose Path of the Totem might be a little bit... I mean, Path of the Totem is a little bit less of your classic Barbarian.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. I haven't played a Path of the Totem Warrior Barbarian before, but it's a little bit of a different flavour. It's a bit more of a spiritualistic sort of path that you can take. So rather than going down the sort of, that really berserk Barbarian path of the Totem Warrior is you have a spirit guide, and you can pick from 3 animals: the eagle, bear, or wolf. And so depending on what animal you choose as your spirit animal, your companion, it will determine what abilities you get. Like for example, here if you were Path of the Totem Warrior and you chose bear, and while raging, you have resistance to all damage except psychic damage. So again, it sort of still is building off those core mechanics of the Barbarian, but it's doing it in a little bit of a different way, and you can sort of specialize your character into... If you've got a bit of a different vision, rather than just a mindless ball of muscle, if you've got a bit of a different vision for your character, you can still play the Barbarian and have that versatility to be able to branch out a little bit and add a bit of, as like I said, add a bit of a flavour to your character, have a bit of a backstory about why they have that spirit.
I was about to touch base on that as well. So you can choose your pathways based on the type of character that you have. Like for example, my character is a Barbarian dwarf, and she's just all about war and fighting and everything. So how I imagine her, how I created her, she wouldn't be the type of person to have a spiritual side. So if you have a Barbarian that is in touch with nature or has some sort of animal handling kind of backstory or anything with...
Or even if you're just wanting them to be a little bit more or a little bit different than just your classic, meathead, basically. I'm not saying that if you're a Barbarian who takes Path of the Berserker, you have to be a meathead by any means. But Path of the Totem Warrior, it sort of just breaks the sort of, stock standard mold a little bit more and gives you, like I said, a bit of a different flavour, a bit of a different take, still with quite similar mechanics, but a little bit different to your more, classic meathead Barbarian, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
And then, like I said, we won't go through all of them, but generally, most of the skills as you level up with the Barbarian are focused around, all the abilities are focused around the rage, the frenzies, the extra attacks. Like I said, depending on what path you take, it's sort of focused around that. So if you're keen for sort of a really muscly, strong, warrior type character with no fear, with hack first, ask questions later, that a Barbarian is probably the perfect fit for that sort of style or idea of a character, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. And I just think with Barbarian, you can have a lot of fun with it, because if you're definitely new to D&D and you want to experience combat really firsthand, Barbarians are in there, so it's good to learn some like battle techniques and strategy too. Yeah, absolutely. And Barbarians certainly do have to think outside the box sometimes. For example, if there's a combat with a lot of enemies, if you're running in and getting right up close, getting surrounded might not be a very good idea, so you might have to try to figure out ways to get around that. Or if you're battling things, as you've come across, if you're battling things that have resistance or even immunity to physical damage, you've got to think outside the box. So there's definitely a lot of fun you can have with the combat. It's not just necessarily go and swing my axe, and that's all there is to it. There's I think there's a lot of fun. There's a lot of thrill to having to take hits as well, which the Barbarian does really well. They can take hits, or block hits and dodge hits without going down, which is a lot of fun. It adds a bit of excitement for you as a player as well. Yeah, definitely. And I feel as though with Barbarians, there can be a lot of common traits when making a Barbarian, is that some think you have to make a Barbarian basing all your stats around strength. So having a strength-based character, which means, hard hitting and a lower AC. Well, depends what you put. Depends what you put your points into. Because obviously, if you put your points into strength, you are going to hit harder. You're going to deal more damage, and you're going to hit more often. Yeah. If you put your points into strength as a Barbarian. But I think, I find like Barbarians are often put as a offensive kind of character, but Barbarians can also become a really, really great defense character too. So especially if you put your points mainly in dexterity to boost up that AC, because that way you can still, when you have rage and you have frenzy and you have extra attack, those 3 attacks will build up the points, but at the same time you're not getting hit, especially with your AC being so high. So I know we've come across quite a few discussions where people may ask, like, why didn't you build your character on strength? Why aren't you putting your points in strength? I suppose it's really important as well to preface that with, there is no and I always think about this, there is no right or wrong way to build a character. If you build a character that works well with the group you're playing with, but if you build a character that you enjoy, that you're having fun with, then that is the right build of that class, of that character. So there's no right or wrong way. There is, I suppose, different ways that you can do it to get the most benefits from your character. For example, with a Barbarian, if you put put barely any points into your strength and your defense, you're probably going to go down a lot more, because obviously that's your core sort of attributes. But there's no right or wrong way to do it. No, but definitely not. I think probably the more common ways is the way you mentioned, strength, building your strength points first. Your constitution is always good as well to get your health up, and then sort of having dexterity as sort of like you're a secondary sort of skill. Yeah, definitely, because it's definitely not a weak way of building a Barbarian, because I've built my Barbarian as a defense character, and before she picked up a wonderful magical item, she didn't hit as hard as some of the party members, but it was decent enough to build up the points once I frenzied. If all 3 of my attacks ended up hitting, those points do build up. But the great thing is, because we did have some of our party members asking why I wasn't putting my points in strength, but because my AC was boosted up and my health was boosted up, everyone was going down but me. As a DM, not that I'm trying to kill my players. I'm definitely not trying to do that. But as a DM, I must admit, I do get a little bit of a sense of joy when I finally hit your character. Yeah. Because it is so hard, because they're such a defensively strong character. It's very, very hard to actually, to do much damage to her. It gets a bit funny around combat, because you'll be hitting them high numbers, like, oh, I rolled a 22, does that hit? And I'm just File with my nails. No, doesn't hit.
And again, that comes down to how you want to play the character as well, because, you know, and people really get stuck into that mindset of, I've got to do a huge amount of damage. I've got to be dealing massive amounts of damage all the time.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, you can play like that if you like, but you don't have to play like that. I think your character is so invaluable purely because you just are such a defensively strong, tanky character that you keep the party alive, and you help win combats purely by being able to take damage, being able to take threat away from other people, and allowing other people to deal the damage.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and, you know, it comes down to, you don't have to be dealing a massive amount of damage to be playing, you know, having fun in D&D. I mean, there's plenty of classes that deal very little damage, but, you know, support, like heal, provide bonuses. There's lots of different ways to go about it. And yeah, like I said, your barbarian in particular is so defensively strong. You built yours more around dexterity to have that high AC.
Yeah,
You've still got and constitution to have the higher health. You've still got your strength as quite a high stat, but it's not
my
maxed.
highest.
It's not your highest.
Yeah, because I think I've maxed out both dexterity and constitution.
Have you maxed out both of those?
I'm pretty sure I've maxed out both of them.
You did roll quite high for your stats.
I did.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the thing. You could be the heavy hard hitter with the barbarian, or you can go as a defensive build. I mean, you can build the character however you like, but if you are thinking that the barbarian can't be a defensive tank,
you definitely can.
You can, because
definitely can.
That, like Ben said, that you're saving the party, because you could be the focus of attention to the enemy going in, taking all the hard hits while everyone else is dealing damage, because if your AC is high enough, the enemy may not even get a hit in at all, wasted a turn, or if they get a hit in, your health is so high up, you're not exactly losing a lot.
And you've got to admit as well, it's a badass feeling when you get to take damage and take damage and take damage, and you're still standing at the end of it. And, you know, you just, like, and you've got the party members looking on like, oh my, how are you still okay? Like, it's, you know, it's a pretty badass feeling playing that barbarian that you just keep going and keep going. And
to put into perspective, where last session we reached level 9. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, we just got to level 9, and my barbarian has a health of, I think it's 117 or 118.
Which is
very high.
Really quite high. And you haven't been taking averages, so whenever we level up, all of the players will roll their hit die and then add their constitution modifier, so that they get a different amount of health every time they level up. It adds a bit of variety. So you've rolled quite well as well to have such high health.
Definitely. And my AC, which if you are new to this episode, AC is pretty much like your body shield. So it's how well you can dodge, how strong your armor is. So obviously enemies have to roll to hit, so the highest on the dice is a 20, obviously with modifiers on top of that, but my AC is a 24, so it's very
hard to hit you.
So say if a monster only has a modifier of 2, they will probably never hit me, because the highest they're going to get is 20.
Unless they get a critical. If they roll a 20.
Yeah, unless they roll a
critical is guaranteed to hit.
But if they...
You've come across a few creatures, I don't know if you've noticed, but even last session you came across a couple of creatures that could not possibly hit you unless they rolled a 20.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very beneficial in a way to think about when you build your barbarian. If you are thinking of strength but want to try a defensive character as well, it's worth it.
Great fun. And you still deal damage as that sort of defensive character as well. I mean, it's not like you're not dealing damage. You're still dealing damage.
Yeah.
You've just substituted dealing a little bit less damage to have even more survivability.
Yeah.
Basically, but it comes down to how you want to play it though.
Yeah,
like we said, there's no right or wrong way to play it. It comes down to the and I encourage when you want to create a character, sort of envision an idea and a concept for a character first.
Yep.
And it comes down to what your idea for the character is. If your idea for the character is someone who can deal a massive amount of damage in a quick succession, that can dole out the pain, then put your points into strength and build that really damage based barbarian. But if you've got a character in mind that is this big sluggish brute that if you punch him in the face he doesn't even feel it, build like the defensive based barbarian and sort of go in that direction. There's like I said, there's no right or wrong.
Yeah, definitely. Barbarians are a lot of fun, and they have you can match them with some really fun races too that really complement the barbarian class.
Absolutely. There is some fantastic classes that, I mean, in saying that, I would love to see, not that I have, but I would love to see like a gnome barbarian.
A gnome barbarian would just be a ball of muscle.
I think that would just be so great to, like, as a DM, to describe the scene of this tiny little gnome just charging into battle, like head on, no fear, like raging, like I just reckon that would be such a great picture to have like some tiny, like a goblin or something just charge in like that.
You'd want to create like a if it was a gnome, you'd want to create some sort of ability so it could roll, because it'd just be a muscle to just form into a perfect ball, and you could roll into battle and just flex
like
out.
Those droids from Star Wars. Oh dear. Well, but I think that's basically a pretty decent overview of, without going into too much detail and confusing you too much, I guess, a bit of an overview of what to expect, I guess, if you've if you're planning on building a barbarian, if you're thinking of maybe trying one out. That's really the flavour that you're going to get with that class and the mechanics that are behind that class.
Yeah, definitely.
But what do you reckon? Do you reckon we should, the moment everyone's been waiting for, the
joke,
the
yoke,
the joke that I think is certainly your favourite part of this stream.
They make me cringe, but they're also funny.
I can see you die a little bit inside each time. I do. You don't want to laugh, but it's fine. It's fine. This one's good. It's themed towards tonight's topic.
All right.
Are you ready? It's great. It's great. Why did the princess marry the barbarian?
Because of his girthy muscles.
No, it wasn't because of his girthy muscles. The muscles were a bonus. No, the princess married the barbarian because she thought he was brute-iful.
Oh God, no, that's terrible. Come
on, that's good. That's good. She thought he was brute-iful.
I think last week's were better.
Oh, come on. I thought that was a good barbarian one. Oh dear. That's one of my favourite parts of the stream is the fantastic joke. But that'll about sum us up for tonight.
Yeah.
We're going to try and, as we said at the start, we're going to try and touch base at least on every class at some point. We don't want to go too in depth and sort of just be reading straight from the manuals and stuff, because we don't want to overwhelm people with information, but we want to give good overviews and good ideas of the classes, different pros and cons, key features, of each class. To sort of give you a bit of a hand if you're thinking of trying one out, what you might come across.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll go through probably the stock standard, not races, sorry, classes. I think, is there classes in other books, or are they
there are subclasses. So when they release new books like Xanathar's Guide to Everything, stuff like that, they release extra subclasses. So there are other subclasses that we haven't touched on tonight that are for Barbarian, but I feel like that the extra subclasses and extra races and stuff would be better touched on in like sort of their own separate episode, where we can sort of hone in on the new features that get released. Because like I said, unless you go out and buy the extra materials, most people are going to have the player's handbook if they're starting out, or have access to a player's handbook, but aren't necessarily going to have all the extra materials. So we'll start there and we'll sort of expand as we go.
So we'll probably just cover with what's in the player's handbook, and if you have a player's handbook, get it out and go along with it. Have a bit of a read
through.
And
but maybe we might encourage people to expand their D&D book collection and buy all of the material.
Yes, because there's so much out there.
And it is addictive, so be careful.
Alrighty, well, I think that's us for tonight. Thank you so much for joining. And we'll be back next week with more D&D fun.
Thursday, 8 o'clock.
Oh, good question. Is D&D expensive to get into? No, I don't think so at all.
It's certainly not.
As a player?
It can be an extremely expensive hobby if you want it to be.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you can get away with a single set of dice, which you can get for like, if you get a cheap set, you can get for like $7.50. Single set of dice, and I would encourage everyone to have the player's handbook.
Yeah.
those are really, and you even don't need the player's handbook if you've got a friend that you can borrow theirs or something. However, I would recommend that people get the player's handbook because then they can have a proper read through and understand a bit better the rules, the mechanics.
I think the player's handbook retails for about $60.
It's about $60.
So really, you just need the player's handbook, so $60, and a set of dice,
that's
and you're
all
good
you
to
need.
go.
You do not need any extra materials at all. There is a huge amount of stuff you can do with simply those two items.
Yeah.
Like I said, you can spend I spent a lot of money. I've got a lot of dice. You don't need all the extra. I've got lots of add-on books and everything, miniatures, but you can certainly have many years of fun in the hobby with simply just a single set of dice and a book.
Yeah.
However, I am yet to meet a D&D player who only has a single set of dice.
Yeah, the dice is what will set you back because you'll just want to get more and more.
Because you'll want more.
And figurines as well.
Yeah, but again, they're not essential. They're certainly not essential to the game.
Yeah.
You can use dice for figurines if you want. You can use paper figurines. There's plenty of cheap ways to get around that without spending heaps of
unless
dosh.
you like collecting them and painting them.
Yeah,
figurines are also a fun little
that's
hobby
like
to go
a
down.
hobby within itself is painting and collecting the figurines.
But yeah, other than that, D&D I find is not expensive at all. Once you have the player's handbook and a set of dice, you're ready to roll.
Yeah, you can put as much money into the hobby as you want, but you certainly are not required to. It's not like it's like one of those online games where there's a monthly subscription or anything. If you get together with your mates, you just need your sheet of paper to write your character down on,
and
a
your
set of dice to roll, and your imagination.
Which is free.
It is free.
Yes. Alrighty guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll be back next week with more D&D content, and have a lovely night.
Yeah, thank you so much everyone. Look forward to catching up with you again next week.
Alrighty, bye guys.
See ya.